When does asymmetry actually matter? So as a physiotherapist, when I'm working with an athlete in pretty much any other sport, I don't care that much about imbalance as long as it's not affecting their function in the sport. In fact, if you think about it, there's a lot of sports where having a dominant side is actually a good thing. Tennis, golf, soccer, hockey, even something like snowboarding, all are going to have a dominant side. But what makes equestrian different is that it's not just our bodies that are at play. If we're crooked, we're always putting more weight or more force through one side compared to the other. That asymmetry gets imposed on the horse. So then when is it worth addressing imbalance in riders? See, I look at it a little bit differently. There's functional asymmetry, and that's an actual crookedness that you can see expressed when the rider is riding. And then there's measurable asymmetry, which maybe we could pick up with things like force plates or dynamometers or even different functional tests, but that maybe don't actually show up when the rider's in the tack. So I like to think of it this way. If this is the threshold of what you need physically to be effective as a rider in your sport, discipline, and level, and say person one is asymmetrical, where maybe their right side has a 10 or 15% advantage on their left side, if both sides are not quite meeting that threshold of what they need physically to actually be effective, then this asymmetry matters a lot more, because getting 10 or 15% closer to what they actually need is going to make a big difference in how they execute things in the saddle. But if this rider, same discipline and level, has a surplus of strength or mobility or whatever this line is representing, then this 10 or 15% difference doesn't matter so much, because they're never actually getting into that range where it's going to make a difference. So when riders come to me and they say, oh, my left hip is restricted or my right arm is dominant, yes, we can measure those things and we can address them, especially if that's being reflected in how they ride. But I always peel it back a layer. And when I'm prescribing exercises or a workout plan, my preference is always to look at the bigger picture and decide, do we need to get into the nitty-gritty of this specific asymmetry? Or do we just need to boost the system as a whole so that asymmetry doesn't matter? Moral of the story is that for most riders, if we can get your strength, your power, your mobility, your endurance to a place where it is in surplus of what you actually need to be successful in the saddle, then having a 10 or 15% difference side to side probably doesn't matter as much to your function. So for most riders, you probably have more bang for your buck trying to boost the system as a whole and getting super into the nitty-gritty of imbalances.